What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Eric Wilson. Today, joined by my co-host, Anthony Rivardo. In the dead of the offseason, something finally happened. The Rangers have extended Ryan Lindgren to a one-year contract worth $4.5 million. This did happen a couple days ago, but we were a little busy. So this isn't really going to be much of a breaking news breakdown going over the contract. It's going to be more of a discussion about how we feel about it from what I've seen over the last couple of days. The fan base is pretty torn on it. I personally would have liked to see a little bit more term on this, but I know Colin and Will, who couldn't be here today, they think the one-year deal is fine. We'll get into all the reasons why, talk about how we feel, and see where it goes from there. So we're going to get right on into that. Before we do, make sure you guys like, subscribe, ring that bell so you miss notification, leave your thoughts on this contract down in the comment section below. And lastly, be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. But Anthony, I haven't even heard how you're feeling about this contract yet. So how are you, and what are your initial thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'm doing well, and I'm kind of torn on it as many of the fans are. I think that the price point is fine, but the length of the contract is the part that concerns me because we know next offseason the Rangers have a lot of work to do. We know Igor Shesterkin, big decision that needs to be made there. How much are the Rangers willing to pay him? We know he's going to be asking for a lot of money. And then you have other big decisions, Keandre Miller, Alexi Lafreniere. So now the Rangers have essentially added another player to the list of players, a long list of expensive players that they need to configure under the salary cap space next offseason by signing Ryan Lindgren to this one-year deal. I would have liked to see a 2-year deal. Hell, I would have liked to see a 5-year deal. Get him under contract long-term so you don't have to worry about this again next offseason. But now, signing him to this one-year contract, of course, you're going to be able to move on from Trouba next offseason, but you still are going to have to reshape the defensive core if you're not able to keep Keandre Miller next offseason. And I do think that because it's a one-year deal, this could end up looking like a one-year rental or a half-year rental for the Rangers at this point. He could end up becoming a player that they move at the trade deadline. So I think that having him sign this one-year contract has pretty major consequences on the way that the Rangers are going to move about during the regular season, and definitely going to change the way that their plans look next offseason if he's still on the roster.
Yeah, and just to break down the other side of the argument of those fans who are like, oh yeah, one-year deal is perfect, kind of as Colin explained to me yesterday, is a one-year deal is fine because if he plays bad or gets injured too much, then they don't have to worry about like a broken, like not in his prime anymore player stuck on the roster for multiple years. You know, we've seen it in the past with players like Dan Girardi, who was a phenomenal defenseman for the Rangers at the start of his tenure, but then the injuries piled up until eventually we had an old crippled defenseman that we ended up having to buy out of his contract. So this one-year deal could benefit us in that way. I mean, when was the last time Ryan Lindgren went through an entire season without missing significant time due to an injury? But, you know, at the end of the day, that only applies, in my opinion, if he does get hurt again. If he does have a bad season, then after this 1 year, we can just let him go. But what happens now if he has a great bounce back season? He plays a full 82 games, doesn't get injured, looks like one of our top defensemen playing with Adam Fox. Then you kind of run into the problem that you were just breaking down, where now you have another defenseman to add on to your long list of free agents next summer. That's going to look a little hard to sign. You know, Miller's going to have a big pay raise. Lafreniere is going to get a massive pay raise. And Igor Shesterkin wants to take up like 14% of our team's salary cap. So to me, if you do choose to keep Lindgren after this upcoming season, I don't see us signing all four of those players. And Lindgren might be the odd man out in that one. You know, if I had to choose 3 out of those 4 free agents, I probably would leave Lindgren out of the equation. So to me, when I look at this one-year deal, I think this might be Lindgren's final season, possibly. I know you just mentioned possibly we can trade him at the deadline, maybe look for an upgrade there, or, you know, after the summer, just let him walk and see. But overall, I don't hate the contract. I think back to what you said, maybe a 2 or 3 year deal could have been fine because if you take those injury concerns into account, a possible decline in his career, it wouldn't be too devastating to have him tenured for another 2 or 3 years. You know, if things start to go downhill, maybe you slide him down the lineup, give a guy like Keandre Miller playing time up with Adam Fox there. Kind of like we've done with Jacob Trouba, where, you know, his play started to go downhill a little bit. Slide him down, give him a little bit less playing time, hopefully lessen the bloat that it has on our team. So 2 or 3 years, I think would have been fine. The 1 year deal, I think, is better than, you know, like a 7 or an 8 year extension, but I don't think it's perfect by any means. As far as the price point goes, I've heard people calling it an overpay. I don't really consider it to be that way. I know he was looking for around 4 to 5 million. I think the Rangers really just wanted to keep it below 5. So, contract negotiations head to arbitration. They settle on 4.5. That's a fine number by me. But, looking at the concerns and the possibilities that we have here, do you think fans are overreacting to like the possibility of injuries bringing his career down? Like, do you see the validity in that argument, or do you think that's all kind of blown away?
No, I don't really see the validity. I think it's overblown. I mean, he played 78 games, I believe it was, last season. Sure, he's had some seasons where he's missed 20 to 30 games, and that's a pretty significant chunk of time. But I think that Ryan Lindgren has just had some bad luck moments in the past. I think last year he demonstrated that he can stay healthy across a full season. It's just about getting some good luck. And I'm not overly concerned by it because when you consider the talent that's in the Rangers defensive core, sure, you might miss Lindgren for 20 games. Let's say that happens. But look at the talent level that he has versus the next best guy, And I think that when you look at the market of defensemen that were available in free agency, you probably take Lindgren over the majority of those guys who were available. And you know that the Lindgren and Fox pairing is your best. Why break that up over a million or two, I guess? And it's probably splitting hairs at that point because it probably was like a million max that we're talking about. If it came in at 3.5 million, fans probably wouldn't say it's an overpay. And that 1 million, what is that really buying you? I'm not so sure. So I'm fine with this. I think it's a decent price point. And again, if it's a contract that halfway through the year, the Rangers aren't satisfied with the way he's playing, they aren't satisfied with his health status, they can move on from him midway through the season at the trade deadline, retain about half of that salary if they want, and then boom, there you go. Free up that cap space that some Rangers fans are frustrated to lose. But I think that the major selling point, he's a really good player. You don't want to break up the Lindgren Fox line. And again, you know that he's still young. He's still ascending into his game. If you can get him long-term next offseason, that's great. I just think the problem is the one-year deal. It's bad timing is all. I wouldn't have minded a one-year deal next offseason or last offseason, but since it's going into next offseason and the Rangers have so many paydays that they have to handle, it just complicates things. It's bad timing, but it's a fine compromise from where the Rangers wanted to be and where Lindgren wanted to be. They both wanted to get something done. I'm happy that they did because I think that Lindgren's an excellent player. I just do have my concerns that I've already laid out about what this means long-term for the Rangers.
Yeah, I mean, upon first glance, you could say it's bad timing, but who knows what's going through Drury's mind, what his master plan is. Maybe this is a strategic move by him, lock up Lindgren for one more season, and maybe to Drury, this is Lindgren's last season because after this year, $4.5 million off the books, don't have to sign Lindgren anymore. That's pretty much half of Lafreniere's next contract. So maybe he's thinking ahead, getting the money on a good player right now, and the next season he'll throw it towards the better players that we want to keep longer term. So I'm not sure how to feel about this. I think it is going to be discovered just based on how Lindgren plays. I really don't like the one-year deal, even though I kind of understand what people are saying. But if Lindgren does play really good, has a career year, and just kind of forces the Rangers' hand that like we'd be stupid to let him go, then we're kind of cooked. So we'll see what happens. But I think overall, I don't hate the contract. I don't love it. I'm just kind of like, you did what you had to do, Drury. Like, we got our defenseman, because if he didn't sign, then who? Like, who's going to play in his spot? But the last thing we'll talk about really quick for a minute or two before we wrap up here is just the offseason is pretty much done. Every free agent we had left to sign has been signed. We made our trade for Riley Smith, and unless some massive curveball comes out of left field, we have our roster in place. So obviously Lindgren's going to be returning to play with Fox. Defensively, we'll have Keandre Miller and Braden Schneider, and then Jones and Trouba. So how are we feeling about that defensive core? Because personally, I think it's an upgrade. I think Jones is better than Eric Gustafson. I think that Schneider and Miller pairing looked really well, and we saw them together last season. And obviously our top pairing in Lindgren and Fox has been phenomenal. So I think our defensive core is upgraded personally. I like it. Jacob Trouba probably won't be receiving as much playing time. So, I guess 2 thumbs up for me. So honestly, I like the moves he made defensively this year. Contract might not be perfect, but looking at the core projected for next season, A+ by jury.
I'm happy with it, but it all depends on the performance of Jacob Trouba. If he absolutely stinks, the Rangers defensive core is going to suffer because of that. If he can just play at a decent average level, they will be fine. And for what it's worth, last season, he had a stretch of games where he was playing at a really high level, like not even a decent level, but a really high level. Jacob Trouba, at one point last season, we were like, okay, he is so back. And the fans were behind him, and everybody was hyped about the way that he was playing. And then he started to teeter off a bit, and then he got injured, and then he turned into one of the worst players in the NHL. So possibly going into the season with a chip on his shoulder because of all the drama of this offseason, fully healthy, maybe we get a bounce-back season from Jacob Trouba. Maybe the fans love him once again. Not banking on it. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's possible. So I figured I'd air out a little bit of optimism for Trouba, since everything that we hear is so negative and pessimistic about Trouba. I'll be the optimist here. It's possible that he has that bounce back. We saw a glimmer of it last season. And if he does, then I think this Rangers defensive core is awesome. Because like you said, I like Zach Jones a lot. I think he is an upgrade over Gustafsson. Know the Lindgren and Fox pairing is great. I love Keandre Miller. I think that Braden Schneider is a great player. It really just all hinges on Jacob Trouba and whether or not he blows up and commits a bunch of stupid penalties and forgets to play defense half the time like he did in the postseason. But if he plays at a decent level, I think it's a great defensive core. And listen, the Rangers did a great job keeping their roster intact. It's a President's Trophy winning roster. I don't expect them to reach that height once again, because I think a lot of teams got better around them and they didn't necessarily make those improvements. But then again, who knows? I believe in Peter Laviolette. I believe in the talent on this roster. It's still a really good one. And while the defense was the crutch for this team in the postseason last year, I think that some subtle improvements that they've made along the way will allow them to hopefully maintain their level of success from last season and hopefully improve upon it.
Of course. And, we'll keep our fingers crossed. Like I said, this Lindgren signing, probably the last big move we're going to see this offseason. So the roster is set. We're pretty confident and being optimistic here. But we're curious to hear how you guys feel, not just on the Lindgren contract alone, but just our entire roster heading into this season. Leave your thoughts down below on how confident you are heading into the 2024-25 season. We'll be back soon with more content whenever anything happens. I think we have a trade discussion to talk about soon. So be on the lookout for that. Make sure you turn on those notifications. Please please subscribe if you did enjoy. Lastly, be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. But most importantly, have a good one. We'll be back soon. And let's go Rangers.